All right, we are live here for the email after iOS 15 webinar. I'm gonna wait for some people to pile in here and start in a few minutes, and then we'll get started. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, we'll give a few minutes for some people to pile in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Feel free to type any questions in the chat or in the questions if you want me to go over anything, and I'll get started here in 3 or 4 minutes. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and let's go ahead and get started on that. All right. So yeah, welcome everybody. Today I'm going to go over email after iOS 15. Just a little bit about me. My name is Will. I'm the founder of Flow Candy. I'm a former store owner myself. I've probably worked with 300 or 400 stores now. We generate millions of dollars every month for a lot of our clients in emails, upsells, SMS. Probably worked in not every single, but I've worked in a lot of verticals regarding email, a lot of e-commerce stuff. You name it, I've probably worked in most of it. And I'm currently based in Atlanta, Georgia. But that's enough about me. Like, you're here for really the title of this, which is Apple killing email marketing? And I'm going to sort of dive into that. So first off, if you didn't already know, I think it was on the 20th, Apple launched the mail privacy protection. This is sort of a feature of iOS 15. And basically what this allows Apple users to do is it allows them more control over privacy, over what us as email marketers and what email service providers like Klaviyo or MailChimp can track when it comes to email marketing. So the 3 things that really users can now like turn off the ability to do is they can turn off open tracking. This is probably the biggest one, and I'll get into a lot of examples of this and how this can impact you. blocking IP address and the ability to hide your email address. And, I'm taking this straight from what Apple released like a few days ago. Mail privacy protection prevents senders from learning whether an email has been opened and hides the IP address, so senders can't learn a user's location or use it to build a profile on them. So that is sort of where Apple is moving, and that's exactly what this new feature in iOS 15 does. So let's get to the heart of this. Like, what is the impact for stores like you guys that use email marketing? Okay, so I'm going to go through like the sort of the 5 or 6 things I see, and I'm going to talk about which ones have the highest impact for you. So probably the biggest impact thing that's going to probably start affecting you today, and certainly a few months from now as we move into the fourth quarter and Black Friday, is open rates will be less accurate. So you just simply cannot rely on that as a metric much more. Also, because of that revenue tracking that uses open attribution. So what I mean by that is a lot of these ESPs track revenue based on if someone opened an email or not. That will become less effective. Also, any segment that you're using that you create that uses open email, like an example would be a 60-day engaged segment or a 30-day engaged segment, that will become flawed in terms of sort of grouping people into that segment. Also, another thing is like A/B testing and send time optimization that is using open rate will be impacted, which is not as big of an impact, but certainly if you're a store that's doing a lot of A/B testing, that'll have an impact. And then any IP-based segmentation and filtering, this I wouldn't say is not that common. A few stores we work with are doing this, but not all of them are. And then probably a lower impact would be any flow or automated campaigns that are triggered or filtered off open events could be flawed. Again, not all the stores I work with are doing this, but I'll talk about what you need to do to protect yourself if you are. So one important caveat to all of this is this only pertains to people that are using iOS Mail. So anyone that's using an iPhone, anyone that's using Apple Mail or an iPad, which accounts for basically 48 to 50% of your list. Okay, so any customer or any subscribers that are on your list that are on Gmail or Yahoo Mail or use an Android or use Outlook, like this does not pertain to them. This only pertains to people that are using an iPhone. Another caveat to this is users do have the option to opt out of this. Some people could opt in to saying like, hey, I want, people and email companies to track like when I open an email. So people do have the option to do that, but I expect that to be low. I don't expect that to be very high. And just sort of like a general opinion, I expect this to be a trend. I expect like in the future, Android and Gmail and some of these other email service providers are probably going to be building tools or giving sort of features that allow users to opt out of open tracking. So I'm preparing my clients that this is going to be like a trend in the future. So with all that said, what are the action steps that I need to take in order to make sure that my store and my revenue stays the same and my marketing stays the same and nothing like bad happens to my marketing in my store? And the very first thing is that I always tell clients is you need to get serious about UTM tracking. And typically when I talk to store owners or people that are working with stores, they either are like really serious about their UTM tracking, they know exactly what they want to do, or they've never even heard of it. They have no idea what I'm even talking about. But now with this iOS 15 update, everyone needs to be taking this seriously. And if you're a smaller store, the best tip I have for you, especially if you're using Klaviyo, is to set up automatic UTMs at the account level. So you can go into your settings right here, and you can click UTM tracking, and you can make sure UTMs are added to every single link. That way it's getting tracked. And, if you don't know what I'm talking about, like a UTM parameter, it's just simply, and I put this Neil Patel quote up. It's like simply tags that are added to a URL. So when someone clicks that URL with those UTM parameters added, it gets sent into Google Analytics and you can track all of it. Okay, and I'll give you an example in a second of what I mean. But if you have no idea what I'm talking about, and this is all foreign language to you, or you're like a much smaller store and you don't have time to literally focus on this, just go into your settings, go to UTM tracking, and just toggle this button that says automatically add UTM parameters to links. Okay, that's like the best tip I can have for you. If you're a larger store, you're more familiar with UTM tracking, now might be the time to start customizing it more. And Klaviyo, I believe in 2020, maybe they launched a feature where you can get like much more granular with UTM tracking. So you can set like custom values at the email level. So I would consider that. And that's like what I'm talking about in this top image. You know, you can go into a flow or you can go into an image and you can add very custom parameters. Now, again, like where does this all show up? So the reason we're doing this is because when you log in to Google Analytics, you'll see if you go to your overall source medium or traffic source medium report, all of this data will now be propagated over to Google Analytics. So you'll be able to see like how many sessions you got, how many clicks you got, and like any orders that might have come in. So and the conversion rate. So that's sort of like everyone should be doing this. It's like a simple fix. If you're not doing this, many of you probably already are, but if you're not doing this, just go ahead and enable this, because this is going to give you much more accurate reporting in the future. All right, tip number 2 with iOS 15 is you need to change your engaged segmentation that you're using for newsletters. So you're going to hear me say this a lot. Like, remember, opened email is no longer an effective metric. So if you're already using this, a lot of people use this. This is the first metric they add when they're building a segment. Is this has open email at least once in the last 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or whatever like sort of days you're using to classify an engaged segment. Like, this opened email metric is not going to be effective anymore. So what we're using, the new criteria we're sort of testing with some of our clients is like, have they clicked on an email in the last X amount of days? Have they been active on site? Have they placed an order? Have they started checkout? When were they active? Have they viewed a product? Have they added it to cart? Stuff like this is going to be really, really valuable. This is going to sort of be the new metrics around sort of classifying who is engaged and who is not engaged. So easy fix. And just one like quick pro tip on this, you know, if you send a newsletter to like a 30-day or a 60-day engaged, like you have the next 30 or 60 days from, I think, the September 20th, when iOS 15 was really updated, you have the next 30 or 60 days. You still can keep that open email metric in there. So we're keeping that metric in there. It's just like after 30 days after iOS 15 launched, we're going to delete that. So just one important pro tip there. Tip number 3 I have for you is move to clicked email revenue attribution. So again, like I said, remember, open email is no longer an effective metric. If you don't know what I'm talking about, basically what I'm talking about is a lot of these ESPs, especially Klaviyo, they use what's called open email or sort of email open as a revenue attribution metric, and they have what's called a conversion window. So if, let's say, I open an email on Monday, and then 3 days later I come back and I buy something, Klaviyo is going to count that as revenue. Historically, at least that's how it's been. But leading up to this iOS 15 launch, they now allowed you to have clicked email as sort of like the metric. So now it's only going to count revenue if someone actually clicked on the email. So that means, like, if I open the email on Monday and I buy on a Wednesday, but I didn't click, it's not going to count that as revenue. So I'm like a big fan of this regardless of iOS 15, because I think open email is sort of a vanity. Open email revenue attribution is kind of a vanity metric, but I think clicked email is much more closer to the source. So that's what I would do. And in order to do this, just remember that that like how you do this, because this is kind of confusing. If you're in Klaviyo, go to Klaviyo, go to your settings, click on email, and then scroll down to tracking settings, and you'll see where you can start playing around with the conversion in the window. So big tip there. I'm recommending most of my clients do this. And let me know if you have any questions on that. Tip number 4 is around A/B testing. And this is a rabbit hole we could get down, and I could talk all day about A/B testing, but right now we're advising our clients to prioritize A/B testing off click-through rate and clicks. I'm just telling everybody that opens are really like the new clicks, or the clicks are the new open. Okay, so everything's going to be based around clicks. That's going to become like really one of the most important metrics, and because of that, stuff like subject line A/B tests, preview line A/B tests, sender name A/B test, sending time A/B tests. Like traditionally, these like the success of these tests, like if I was split testing a subject line or split testing sending times, the success of these tests traditionally have been defined by the open rate. So if I have email A has this subject line, email B has that subject line, and email B1, it was typically because the open rate was higher. So that's no longer a winning KPI. You have to use click-through rate if you're going to do those types of tests. So that's one thing to consider. So just use so any sort of test that you were previously using as open rate for testing for open rate, just substitute click-through rate in for that. Regarding template A/B tests, like some of you that have worked with me, like we might do an A/B test where the subject line is exactly the same, but there's 2 different templates that we're testing. Now, nothing has changed there because the KPI we were always measuring on a template A/B test was click-through rate. Because you're looking to see like which template, like they've already opened the email, so you're looking to see which template has an impact in terms of effectively moving the click-through rate and the placed order rate up. So nothing has changed there. And then some more good news is if you're like really worked hard with me before, you know that we've dived deeper into more advanced KPIs when it comes to A/B testing. We're looking at things like earnings per visitor. We even go so far as like profit per visitor. Like nothing's changed there. You can still get that data based off the clicks, and then how much revenue you're getting if you're using click-based revenue attribution. And then if you want to take it a step further with profit per visitor, you can add in some sort of metric around how much your cost of goods sold is. So some good news on A/B tests. I don't think it's really going to have a huge impact. It's just going to take away this open rate. You can no longer really like split test off open rate. Some more advanced tactics here is don't use open email as a metric in warmups and sunsets. So again, remember, open email is just no longer an effective metric. You can't use that in segments. You can't use that in flows and filters and stuff like that. So if you have a lot of these warmups, like, and I'll just sort of break what a warmup into sunset is. Like a warmup is basically a re-engagement campaign or something like that. Like they haven't opened an email in 60 days. I'm trying to warm them up. Like that's no longer going to work. Okay. So you're going to have to find another sort of metric around how to classify somebody as unengaged. Again, I've talked about this in step number 2. You want to use like metrics like obviously clicked, when they joined, have they started checkout recently, have they ordered a product recently, have they viewed a product, or have they added something to cart recently. So some sort of other metric besides opens. Same thing with sunsets. Typically a sunset flow is a flow where, if they haven't opened an email in like 5 sins, they haven't bought something in like 90 days, we typically want to get that subscriber off the list, because clearly they're not somebody that is engaged with the brand and they're not a customer anymore. So we don't want to be paying for them. And this is especially true for stores that are much bigger and have huge databases, and they want to be like, having some sort of hygiene on their list to keep costs low on their ESP. So like this, again, like this sort of criteria around who lines up for a sunset needs to be altered, because typically, have they opened an email in the past 90 days or 180 days or something like that was always a huge metric that we used in sort of onboarding people into these sunset flows, and that's no longer going to be effective. So you're going to have to use, like I just mentioned, other metrics to classify who warms up, who gets defined as somebody who needs to be in the sunset segment. So don't use opens, just use other segments. So just keep that in mind. Tip number 6, and this is my last tip, and I'll get into some questions, is you need to audit all of your flows for that open email metric. And I'm going to give you some tips on where that hidden places where that might be. So first off, if you're triggering anything off a segment, you need to make sure that you need to check that segment and make sure it's not using open email as a metric in it. Okay, so that's step number 1 on the triggers. Everything else should be fine. All the other triggers should be good, but any triggers that are being triggered off a segmentation with an open email, that is now becoming flawed logic, and you're going to have to adjust that. Any flow filters, okay? Like a lot of people have flow filters, like they want to remove people who maybe placed an order or remove people who started checkout or something like this. And you see it right here. If you have any filters around people who have opened an email, and again, I don't really use this a lot in some of the flows we build, but certainly I have built some custom flows before where we use this as a filter. You want to double check that and maybe think about moving to clicked or some other metric besides opened email. Something I do use that I have commonly used is these conditional splits. Like if they haven't opened an email at least once in this flow, or at least once in the past like 7 days or something, we might want to put them down a separate path. So that's no longer going to be effective. So you probably need to swap that out for clicked, or just rethink the entire that conditional split entirely. And way less common, but some of my more advanced clients do use profile properties, and it's sort of like a tag in like other ESPs. And if you have any profile properties that are being updated based on people opening or not opening emails, you're probably going to want to check that as well. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to Q&A. If anybody has any questions around all of this, obviously I just threw a lot at you. Feel free to type in the chat or answer any questions, and I'll be happy to go over any of them. Okay, first question I got was around how does this impact revenue tracking? So to be honest with you, that still don't know this yet. I've heard that there are some theories that Apple will just count everybody as opening an email. So like if they have mail privacy track, or they have that mail privacy protection on, they said I'm enabled that, every email they get is just going to count as an open. And if that's the case, and you have what I talked about earlier, that open email conversion, like that conversion metric is set to opened email, like conversion attribution is set to opened email instead of clicked email. Technically that's going to show everybody who gets an email sent. It's going to show up if they place an order, it's going to show up as that. So I'm still waiting to test that, but I would imagine that if you keep that on, there's chances you could see your revenue going way up in Klaviyo, and it's being there's some wild discrepancies. But I think if you switch to click-based attribution, like I talked about on slide number 2, and we're going to send out the slides after, you'll see that the revenue attribution will be much more in line with what you're probably seeing in Google Analytics. So I hope that answered your question. Cool. Anybody have any other questions? Was just going to ask if we can get these, but that's perfect. Yeah, we'll be sending out the slides, Patricia. Awesome. So I don't see any other questions. If anybody has anything, feel free to email me at any time. It's just will@flowcandy.com. Obviously, we're going to be, if you're currently working with us, you'll probably hear us talk about iOS 15 and some of the things we're doing, especially on the newsletter side. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and I'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.